It's very exciting. It's something pretty new to me in terms of business side thing. I've never had a planned brand of me as such. I've just kind of blagged it and winged it along the way. You know, there's huge amounts of money involved, and it's difficult for the BBC to compete on that front. Is that detailed enough for you?
That's very detailed.
I've really enjoyed it. Something completely different.
Gary Lineker, welcome to the SportsPro podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Absolute pleasure. If we could start with podcasts, actually. The last few years have been really, really successful for Goalhanger. Rest is politics, rest is history, hundreds of thousands of downloads, millions monthly. I want to just get a sense of like how involved are you with that business? Like sometimes you get investors and people that work with production companies that are quite hands off. Is that you, or are you very much involved?
No, I'm very much involved. I don't day to day in the office, but I've kind of got two partners in the podcast business, and we run it together. They're kind of hands on day to day. I speak to them pretty much every day. We have lots of meetings, discuss our strategies, and of course, and decide which pods we want to do and which ones we don't do. So no, I'm very much involved. Yeah, it's become a fascinating and different thing to do, and I'm really enjoying it. Actually, it's good fun.
Yeah, I mean, I host a podcast. I think it's great fun as well. But like, how did you was that something you envisioned a few years ago when you got into it?
It all started about, I don't know, it must have been about 7 years ago now. We did a podcast, just kind of almost experimental, with me and Danny Baker, called Behind Closed Doors, which we did quite a few seasons of, and we really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, and it did quite well, and we thought it was pretty popular, so we thought there might be something in this podcast genre. And from there on, we kind of digressed. We got the We Have Ways of Making You Talk, which is a World War II podcast with James Holland and Al Murray. And that was popular as well. And then we went on, and then The Rest is History was born, with James's brother Tom and Dominic Sambrook, which after a kind of slowish start, but suddenly became this monster that it now is. And from that, and then we wanted to go into politics a little bit, because we're all interested in politics, and we wanted to do something. Everything is so kind of diverse and tribal and slightly nasty at the moment that we wanted to do a political pod with two people from different sides, but doing it agreeably, even if they disagree. So that was, and that's become huge. The rest is politics, and now we're moving on to, which seems a bit mad that we don't have a football pod.
I was going to say, it seems a bit odd that like you being, Goalhanger Productions, your background obviously, but you've waited until pretty much now to do a sports podcast. Well,
I did a podcast, obviously, I mentioned with Danny Baker before, but then I kind of took a step back while we organised these other ones, and now, but we've been talking about doing a football one for a while, and I worked together with Micah and Alan Shearer on a podcast anyway, which we did do. We've done for a while, bit Match of the Day's top 10 one, but that was only for BBC and only on BBC Sounds. So we thought, because we seem to have a really good chemistry and a lot of fun, and it's really enjoyable, that it might be successful to do a regular football one. And I think there's a real kind of, it's weird. There's no massive football podcast. I think Peter Crouch does well, but that's not. It's more kind of
Football Weekly.
Football Weekly. No, there's lots to do well, but there's not a monster. There's not a big one. It's nothing that challenges politics or history, which seems a bit odd in a country that's obsessed with football. So we've looked at it, and we think it needs something with footballers involved, because you don't want to just talk about analysis and this and that and the other, which is fine, and lots of people do that quite well, but it's never going to generate that much interest in a bigger market. So we thought, if we can get the three of us and we do 2 or 3 episodes every week, updating things and doing emergency podcasts when big stories happen, big transfers, etc., that it might do well, and we hope it will.
And is the business with that going to be kind of similar to what you do with the rest is politics and the rest is history, where you bring in that like over the top kind of subscriber, newsletter, live show kind of thing as well?
I think hopefully, if it proves to be popular, that we'll go down that route. But first, we need to get it up and running. We need a fast start. We want hopefully people enjoy it, and obviously the great thing about podcasts is they don't cost anybody anything to listen. And we know from the Match of the Day top 10 ones that we've done that it's by far the biggest podcast on BBC Sounds. So we're hoping that we can kind of bring in more people to hear it and to talk football, because we love football and we're all passionate about it. We watch endless amounts of football, but we've also been in dressing rooms and we've been involved, and we've got reminiscences and stories that we'd like to get out there as well.
How strategic have you been when it comes to those other podcasts? Because I mean, they're all remarkably successful. I think they regularly rank in the top 5, top 10, which is quite rare for one company to have that level of success in a field. Why do you think that has happened?
I think good choices with who we've got. A bit of luck that you need. We've got in the right place at the right time. But I think the most important thing is the chemistry between the hosts. And we've managed to get that right, not just with The Rest is Politics, The Rest is History, but Empire is also generally in the top 10, and it's terrific. And then we've got, there are others that do really well. We Have Ways is consistently successful. The spin-offs like Leading from that Alistair and Rory do as well. We've got 1 or 2 pods we've brought in that we think are great, like The Trawl, which is, I think, a lot of fun. It's very political. I think we know what works, but you never really know how the chemistry is going to be with your host until you actually do the podcast. Obviously, we generally do quite a few pilots first with our guests. Some need more than others, but just to get the style and how it's going to work between them.
And I mean, previously you did Goalhanger Films. Is that something that's going to continue as well, or is in the background? You obviously had the very successful Wayne Rooney show and the Hand of God. Is that still a focus for Goalhanger?
Oh yes, yeah. That's it's we've kind of separated the two things now because we've grown so quick in the podcast world. We're employing quite a few people now, and it's very exciting. It's something pretty new to me in terms of business side of things. But we had the production company first with Tony Pastor and myself. And that's that does well. It's a nice business, but it's different with podcasts. TV shows, you need to have ideas, then you need to pitch them to all the various broadcasters that they might then commission it, and then you go away and then you make a film and it takes forever, and eventually you get an hour on television somewhere possibly, and we love it, and it's something that we'll always do. It's our baby, but the podcast world, you have an idea. You can do it tomorrow if you want, and it's out there and people can enjoy it and listen to it. So there are fewer frustrations, I think, in the podcast world, and it's an interesting genre and it's growing really rapidly, and hopefully it will continue to do so.
It seems like something that you like. I mean, you're getting quite animated when you're talking about it. And Alistair Campbell calls you the boss on his podcast. Are you like? I mean, are you sitting there and thinking like, what can we do next? How do we develop this further? Like, are you getting in like? You said you're involved in meetings, but like, how heavily are you in running that business?
No, I think I'm honestly and fair to say that I'm very hands-on. I have my ideas, and we discuss with Tony and Jack, our 2 partners, on a regular basis. And we meet up quite frequently. We'd always discussing new ideas, and then we're often going out trying to get people to do the podcast or. And so yeah, very much so, and I've really enjoyed it. It's something completely different. I've done a lot of things in the football and broadcasting world, but in business side of things, that's been a kind of new addition. I'm not a businessman in terms of running the company, but I think I'm quite creative in terms of I know how television works, I know how broadcasting works and radio, and obviously and now. The podcast side of things has been something different, but putting teams together and getting something that people genuinely enjoy, and I get stopped in the street now as much. People ask me as much now about our podcast as they do about what flavour crisp I like.
Well, flavours of crisps actually is incidentally something I'd quite like to talk about. I mean, I guess that there's a kind of idea of what the brand of Gary Lineker is, but do you personally think about your own brand in that way, and as how that has evolved maybe in relationship with another brand?
I've never had a planned brand of me as such. I've just kind of blagged it and winged it along the way. But no, primarily I was a footballer, and then I went into broadcasting about football. So, you know, for me, football's my life. And, you know, you got other things that come off the back of it, commercial deals, or, you know, now the podcast world. So deals with different people that I've always tried to have long-term deals and kind of build up a relationship with the people that I work with. And I think that's seems to have worked pretty well. But I've never kind of sat down and gone, right, we need to be a brand. I mean, because that would be a bit key, really.
I mean, people do that, and I do agree with you, but I'm not sure I can quite use the same language, at least for this podcast. But I mean, you have a very long association with a brand.
But the joy of podcasts is you can do what you want.
That is very true.
You can do what you want within reason, obviously.
Obviously, you had that very long relationship with the brand, and they've kind of there's an image of you that comes through those campaigns of this like cheeky chappy who'll nick your packet of crisps. Is that something that you've ever had to push back on ideas with them from, or worked with Walkers on?
No, not really, because we quite liked the premise really right from the start. The fact, you know, obviously it's a play on the fact that, you know, I used to be given this thing which was a little bit kind of nauseating, that, you know, he's Mr. Nice Guy and all that. So we played on it and tried to twist it, and I thought it was a really good and fun idea.
I mean, you don't get to a point where you're still, I think, I mean, you told me before we started recording, 1986 was your first Walkers commercial.
I did a one-off in 1986 around the World Cup, and it was just me in a chair in an England shirt, just turning and going,
"Don't you insist on Walker's crisps?"
And I still remember it to this day. But then the actual campaign that started with a welcome home advert after I came back from Japan, that was January 1995, and I'm still, you know, I still have an association with Walkers. I still do quite a few things for them, and the odd advert here and there. Not quite as frequent as they used to be, because advertising in that form has changed. It's become much more digital rather than perhaps mainstream television. But although we still do those as well. But yeah, it's been a amazing thing, and obviously they're from Leicester as well, which is brilliant. You know, I've now got to deal with Next as well, which another Leicester brand, which is, you know, my hometown, and obviously means a lot.
Sure. I'd kind of like to go into the media section of your career. I mean, I think obviously, like most people my age and younger, that's what we'll know you for. I mean, my dad talks about you as a wonderful goal scorer and obviously winning the Golden Boot. But for me, you've always been the man that presents Match of the Day.
So you say the crisp bloke.
I mean, I do love Salt and Lineker, but it's not quite that.
So do
I. But yeah, I mean, so for me, it's you've been the host of Match of the Day for a long time, but and in that time, media and sports media has changed a lot.
Yeah.
I guess what's kind of one thing for you that, like, getting into it now, you'd have thought this is so wildly different from where we are today.
Yeah.
So, right from the start.
Well, I think what's really the biggest perhaps surprise, not necessarily things that change, because television evolves and we do, and it's so much better now than it was when I first started it, and, you know, the quality of the pictures, the quality of the production, the quality of the punditry, everything, because it gets more competitive, there's more channels, there's streaming, that's also changed things. But I think the one remarkable thing really is that Match of the Day is still probably, well, it is weekly, the most watched football programme in the country. And it's highlights, you know, and that's kind of bucks the trend of any other highlights in any other sport, the fact that it does so well. And we still get enormous numbers of people watching it every either Saturday night, Sunday morning, or now very much on iPlayer, which is a big change. You can kind of watch it when you want. And that's worked. I mean, Match of the Day is easily the most watched show on iPlayer pretty much every week. So I think that's for me is that it has changed so much, yet Match of the Day has managed to stay relevant and important. And it's kind of slightly mystifying, but at the same time, I think the reason is probably that there's still, I don't know, there's a lot of people in this country, close to 50% of the people in this country, that haven't got Sky and BT and all the, and nowadays Amazon and whoever else will do football. So, they rely on that for their little weekly fix of Premier League football. And I think that's probably why it works. But there are also, I know, like, lots and lots of people who watch, the brilliantly covered football on Sky and BT, and but still want to watch Match of the Day. So and thankfully that's the case.
I mean, your point about iPlayer is interesting, because obviously it's exactly the same to go and watch it on YouTube, but what you don't get is yourself, Alan Shearer, Ian Wright, whichever pundits you've got on that week. That's kind of, I think, what makes that show. I'd be interested to actually, if you could kind of talk me through, like, how does Match of the Day work? How does your Saturday look?
Well, I'll talk you through our Saturday. And actually, there's a lot building up all week, and obviously, commentators delegated, they all have to go to the games and such. But on our Saturday, we get there early for the first game. We're in a kind of room, not actually half the size of this, but with a big wall of TV screens where we've got all the matches being played. So the two pundits will be in, and the first game of the day we watched by them both, so they can work out their analysis and do bits and bobs. And then let's take an 8-game Saturday, which is kind of the average. Then at 3 o'clock there'll be maybe six games. In which case, obviously, you can't have a pundit doing each match. So they'll be delegated a match each, or they'll decide which game they want between them. So that's 2 more matches. The editor, the producer, myself will be looking at pretty much everywhere to try and see if there's any other stories, unbelievable goals, terrible VAR moments, or good VAR moments, stuff like that. So that's 3 games they've got properly covered by the pundits. And then the late game we'll all watch, obviously. So that's covered as well. So out the 8 games, they'll have 4 games that have been watched 90 minutes by one of the guys thingy. And then from the other games, we'll get in touch with the people who are doing the edits and what's interesting in the games. We'll talk to us about what we've done. So then we've got a load of time where the guys go and plan their analysis, work out what they're going to say. They go with the guys that edit it for them. Meanwhile, the match edits are going on, which is, it's not an easy business, knocking a 90-minute game down to something between, even if it's a rubbish game, it will get 6 minutes, and then it will up to maybe 4 to 12, I think it's the maximum you're allowed. So, that's a skill in itself. So the guys do that. Meantime, come after the last game, we'll decide the running order, although obviously before the last game we've got a rough idea of the other games in what order they're going to go, which we judge by a variety of different reasons. One, obviously the first thing being, is it the game of the day, match of the day? It's, but you've also got to take into account the significance, the team's playing, is it the top of the table? Watch any sporting event, and obviously the main focus will always be on the leaders. But then if there's an unbelievable game from lower down, it'll catapult itself up to the top. So we kind of sit down, decide that between, it's ultimately the editor's decision, but I'm also involved in it. If people like the running order, it's my idea. If they don't, it's him. And then come about, we'll go through the script. I'll be writing it along with the editor, and then come about 9 o'clock, I'll go and get changed. The guys will go and get changed, and they'll be finalising their analysis. I get into the studio about 9:30. I rehearse, which basically means just scrolling through the links into each match, planning the opening, the closing, and it's still to this day, it seems to surprise people but Match of the Day is live. It's live. It always is, always will be, for 2 reasons. One, it gives them more time to edit the games properly. The longer they get, the better the edit. But most importantly, it's down to It's down to the fact that if there's a big story that breaks at 9 o'clock in the evening and we've already recorded the programme, we'll look foolish, like a manager gets the sack or something, and it's on the news just before match of the day, we don't mention it, we'd look silly. So it's always live. So we rehearse it. The boys come in about 10, 15 minutes before the show, and then during the game's highlights that are going on, we discuss and plan how they're going to do their analysis of that game. And that's how it works. And then we finish normally around midnight and go home. Is that detailed enough for you?
That's very detailed. Over the course of you doing it, so, I mean, I think you took over full time in '99. Is that right?
'99, Des left.
Yeah.
I was the only person in the country that was glad he went.
He was probably quite happy. Got to talk to
Well, that's two of us. Yeah, two of us.
And over that period, how was like your role and like how much of your role in it changed? So you said you have a say over some of the running order and all of that kind of stuff. At first, were you very much in the kind of you do me, I'll do what you tell me, and over time, have you taken more of a kind of producer role on it?
No, I don't take a producer role, but I think thankfully I have a really good working relationship with editors and producers, and between us we sensibly work things out. It's very, very rare that you would disagree, and people go on about the running order and stuff, but they only really ever complain about where their team is wrong. It's saying no, we should be higher. If it was, if they started, everyone suddenly said no, they were complaining about where another team was on, we'd know we probably got it wrong. But there's always going to be a slight difference of opinion. But ultimately, we're going to show the highlights of all the games anyway. So it doesn't really. It's kind of always bemused me a little bit as to why people think that's important. But my role's changed? Not really. It's I've probably over the years gained more knowledge and more confidence, and but it hasn't really changed. I mean, I think I'm obviously way more comfortable now doing the show than I was when I first did it, because it's tough live television. It's not as easy. People think it might be easy presenting. But when you're on live and things are happening, and we have to be incredibly accurate time-wise. We can't overrun a little bit because we have to be off air on a second. And also, so you've got to be tight with the analysis. Sometimes it's frustrating. I want to go and have a big discussion about something, but you can't, because you can't suddenly not show the last game. Now, people complain about the running order, but if you didn't show West Ham playing Aston Villa at the end of the match of the day, or whoever it may be, then that would be an issue.
It's quite clear that like match of the day still plays a massive part in not just like the football landscape, but the sports landscape, and for the BBC as well. But for the BBC, its role in sport has changed quite a lot, I feel like. I mean, it's gone from, you used to present the golf, that's now on Sky exclusively. Do you feel like, how do you see the BBC's role as a sports broadcaster in 2023? Yeah.
In 2023, I think it'll be similar to it's been the last few years. But obviously, there's a gear change. There's huge amounts of money involved, and it's difficult for the BBC to compete on that front. In terms of quality, I think we certainly compete. That's for sure. Some of the events are listed and protected. So FA Cup finals and World Cups and European Championships and obviously other sporting events, although gradually that's changing, but obviously the landscape is changing. You can see that. In 10 years' time, sport, how much will actually be on terrestrial television? I don't know. Streamers are coming in now. You got people like Apple are taking interest in sport. Amazon. Even Sky and stuff would be finding it very difficult to compete with those monsters. So it is interesting, and hopefully Match of the Day will continue. I think the Premier League have been very clever with Match of the Day, because I think they understand that you do need some of their football on terrestrial television, because otherwise you'd lose a lot of your audience. And I think that's really important. I think they've been very clever on that and made it just about affordable for the BBC. So, but who knows what will happen in the future? I wish I did.
There's an interesting kind of wrinkle to that, in that obviously the BBC's picked up the Champions League highlights from 2024. Yep. I don't know how much you're going to be involved in that, but like that's obviously a really successful commercial property in the Champions League. It's been used to be on ITV, now it's pretty much exclusively on pay TV, and now it's coming back in a small way onto terrestrial broadcast. Like, do you think that that's a sort of reflection of how important the BBC is, or free to air is in the media market?
I think so, and I hope so, because there's a lot of people who can't afford the streaming services, particularly at the moment, obviously with the cost of living crisis and going through tough times, a lot of people. So I think it's important for sport to try and help themselves, because it's not just about money, it's also about promoting your brand, your sport. And I think that's where football's been clever, and it's why it's, whereas other sports have kind of sold everything down the either Sky or BT, or which they do a great job of showing it, but lots of people can't afford it. So I think sport needs to have kind of a balance and a fairness to it, and I think that's where football's been cleverer than most other sports.
I mean, we're seeing that a little bit with cricket, aren't we? With the 100, you've got that on the BBC as well,
and that's good. And cricket have got back, because cricket, I think that's one of the reasons that cricket's revived. I think mainly it's because of the short form and the 2020, and it's an exciting thing, and you're getting full stadiums. But I think it's good for cricket to think that way and get something on terrestrial television.
I'm right in thinking you were a keen cricketer in your younger days, right?
I loved cricket. Yeah, I was quite good at cricket.
So if there was to be, I don't know, if they were to reform, because there's a lot of talk around reforming what the 100 is and what T20 looks like, would you ever be interested in presenting cricket on the BBC?
No, I'm only interested in presenting football now. I did golf for a little while. It was fun for a bit, but when you're presenting golf, it's different with cricket because there are breaks. There are no breaks in golf unless there's something wrong with the weather. So therefore, whenever you're on as the presenter, you are interrupting a live sport, and you become an irritant. And I felt, whenever I watched golf, that when they cut to, whether it be Steve Ryder or something, we're going, oh, come on, just show the golf. I mean, at the Masters, you've kind of forced to do that because you have to take American pictures, and Americans like a lot of breaks. So but you become the person watching on telly blames is the presenter, because whenever you're not showing live golf, it's you that's stuck in front of the camera for whatever reason. So in the end, I kind of didn't enjoy that aspect to it, and I felt like I sat there all day doing not a lot. The first thing I did it because I used to love golf, and I still love golf, but I don't play it anymore because I'm kind of back and everything else, and my head. When I first did it, I did the highlights, and that was brilliant, just at the Open. And I used to do a late night show for an hour, which was fun. But in the daytime, it got me the armband, and I could walk on the golf course with all the players. So I'd be striding down the fairways with Tiger Woods and Darren Clarke and my mates and stuff. Not that Tiger was a mate, but Darren Clarke was. That was brilliant. But once I got the main job, it was like I just sat in a thing with it, reading the occasional scorecard, and it just wasn't very exciting.
The other sort of actually interesting thing for me with the BBC and that mix of pay TV and free to air is what's happening with women's football. Obviously, they've got that split with the rights with Sky and for the WSL, got the Women's World Cup going on at the moment. That to me seems like something that could be that's something the BBC could really go into and make a bigger thing if it wanted to. Is that like, you're not currently fronting any of that coverage? Is that something that you'd like to do? Do you follow the women's game?
No, I don't think so. I'll follow it, but I think it's best left to women really to do that. There's it's going to open up lots of jobs for them. But I do follow it. I think it's fantastic for football because we've not you're not got the women's sport doing really well, but that will also attract lots of young girls and people to watching football, and football's my thing. So the more people that are interested in it, the better. And it's you have to say it's improving incredibly quickly. The quality of the football, obviously they're professionals now. It's not that long ago that women were banned from playing football in this country. It's absurd. There's still lots of schools in the country where the girls are not allowed to play, but that's changing, and it's a really great thing.
So the next Goalhanger podcast is The Rest is Women's Football.
I think the rest is football. Football is football, whether the men play it or women play it. And I said, I've been calling this, we're currently in the middle of a World Cup. Do you need do we need to say that it's women? Well, you can see that, and it's the same with the men's. You know, sometimes you're talking about the World Cup, and then people start complaining, say, well, why don't you say it's the men's World Cup? World Cup's a World Cup. It's a football tournament, and that's where I stand on that. But you know, and hopefully England will win it.
That'd be pretty special.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty nice place to leave it. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.